today. Thanks everyone for coming, and I hope that the release that we send out later gets a little more traction. And we did do one radio interview earlier, so
excellent.
We know this report will have legs, and we're really excited to be here today. I'm Susan Yolen. I'm the Vice President for Public Policy and Advocacy at Planned Parenthood of Southern New England. I would like to call your attention to Paula Hodges, who just strolled to the back of the room. She's our Rhode Island Director of Public Policy and Government Relations, and our person on the ground here in Rhode Island doing policy work. Today, Planned Parenthood of Southern New England is pleased to deliver news that we've long sensed to be true. The voters of Rhode Island, like their counterparts throughout New England, are strongly in favor of a woman's right to make private medical decisions and to access the full range of reproductive health care. The common wisdom that Rhode Islanders hold more conservative beliefs about these services and values than voters do elsewhere is simply not true. We were fortunate, along with the Women's Fund of Rhode Island, to be able to engage the deeply respected Washington, D.C.-based firm Lake Research Partners to design and implement the poll that you'll be hearing more about momentarily from Selinda Lake herself. Although the poll was commissioned jointly, PPS&E and the Women's Fund will be releasing organizational specific data at separate events, so we hope that some of you and the press will join the Women's Fund today over at the State House later. And I know that we both look forward to continuing our work together to advocate for policy change that advances women's rights. The information that we've learned from this poll will be useful to Planned Parenthood in several ways. The data demonstrates an enormous opportunity to educate elected officials about the strong support that voters express for reproductive rights, support that they may not be aware of and perhaps might even doubt. We also have an opportunity and a responsibility, in fact, to educate voters as well about their legislators' positions on these issues. You'll see a deep divide between what voters believe and the agenda that we face each and every year up at the State House, usually in the spring, as we fend off a laundry list of restrictions on access to abortion and reproductive health care. But before I spill any more of the beans, I want to defer to Selinda Lake, a leading political strategist whose firm is known for cutting-edge research on issues including the economy, healthcare, the education, and the environment. She's worked for the Democratic National Committee, the National Democratic Governors Association, Next Generation, most every national labor organization, Sierra Club, Eco America, Planned Parenthood Federation, our national organization, the Human Rights Campaign, Emily's List, Kaiser Family Foundation, and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Her work has also taken her to advise fledgling democracies in countries like the Ukraine, which certainly sounds timely right now. Selinda is one of the nation's foremost experts also on electing women candidates and on framing issues to women voters. I hope she won't mind me saying that American politics calls her a super strategist, or better yet, the godmother. And Working Woman says she's arguably the most influential woman in her field. So without further ado, we will walk through the slides about this poll with Selinda Lake. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And I really want to thank Planned Parenthood and the Women's Foundation, because it's very exciting to do this data here. And I hope you do follow us through the day, because the great thing about polling that I love is the conventional wisdom is about 95% wrong, plus or minus 5%. And in Rhode Island, conventional wisdom about these issues is 100% wrong. So you're going to see some very exciting data and be on the cutting edge here. We did a survey, 500 likely 2014 voters, so conservative older electorate, and you'll see that. The error is plus or minus 4%. So in terms of key findings, first of all, this is a state that leans Democratic, but there's also a large proportion of independents. It's a solid majority of voters over 50. I'm sorry, I make a better wall than a window. Thank you. People do think that the state is headed in the right direction in terms of women's issues, but there's a divide in terms of that sentiment. Democrats, unmarried men, and pro-choice voters actually are among the most likely to think that the state is headed in the right direction. Republicans and Protestants leaning a little bit more to thinking that the state is headed in the wrong direction. But really, people are pretty divided. Planned Parenthood is very, very well liked. in the state. In fact, Planned Parenthood is as popular as the Red Cross, significantly more popular than most elected officials in the state. So Planned Parenthood has a base of supporters among Democratic women, strong Democrats, secular voters, younger women, the rising American electorate, which is the new electorate that now makes up a majority of America's eligible population, unmarried voters, younger voters, people of color, and also among, interestingly, part-time employees. Here's the data that's going to be absolutely shocking, and you're going to get to take this on a 3x5 card and hand it out all over the state. Rhode Island is pro-choice by huge margins. And not only is the state pro-choice by huge margins, but the people who are strongest on the pro-choice side far outnumber the people who are strongest on the pro-life side. And that's not true in a lot of other states. In a lot of other states that are pro-choice, the intensity still is on the anti-choice side. Here by 8-1, one of the biggest margins we've seen, the strongly pro-choice people are outnumbering the strongly pro-life people. So really, totally turns conventional wisdom on its head here. Voters are less sure where their state legislature is. They're not sure where their own legislature or their legislature in general is. They're really divided, and a lot of people have no idea where their state legislature is on these issues. Not only are people so pro-choice, which frankly we didn't expect when we were polling, but they also really believe that reproductive health is a key component of preventive health care. And preventive health care, extremely popular. Oh, thank you. I should have brought that over. I'm battling the end of a cold here, so I apologize. Preventive health care, including health care that doesn't have co-pays and that is always covered, very popular in the state from other work we've done. Reproductive health care is solidly perceived to be part of preventive health care. And that includes testing for HIV and sexually transmitted diseases, prescription birth control, and pregnancy-related services. And by the way, the whole issue of birth control, there may be state legislators who want to debate birth control. Rhode Island thinks it was settled in 1960. And they think, what are you doing debating birth control? There are other problems out there. Voters favor Roe v. Wade, the decision, and they don't want to overturn it. But frankly, that's kind of the past. And the future that is even stronger is the nexus around reproductive health care and health care in general. So a core value, it's not even a policy conversation with people. It's so strong that it's at the level of a core value. People believe that reproductive health care is important for all women to have access to. And that includes whether or not you explicitly mention abortion. There's slightly less intensity around abortion when it's mentioned, but overwhelming support, whether you include abortion explicitly or just talked about reproductive health care. There is a little bit more drop-off with Catholics, but even with the drop-off, 78% of Catholics say that it is important to include access to reproductive health care options for all women, including abortion. So yes, it drops off, but it drops off from the 90% level to the 78% level. This policy, more popular than every politician in Rhode Island, dead or alive. Across demographic groups, people are very supportive of protecting the rights of Rhode Islanders when it comes to making medical decisions. A solid majority of voters agree that the state should pass a law that protects the rights of residents to make private medical decisions, including the decision about abortion in the event that federal laws change. So people, everybody says, oh, this state is really on the edge. This state is one of the states that would be tipped toward looking forward to Roe v. Wade overturning. Well, the people in the state don't know they're supposed to be for that. And in fact, they're solidly against it. And they want to maintain the laws in Rhode Island, even if things happen nationally, which is absolutely contrary to conventional wisdom in the state and conventional wisdom nationally. Universally, Rhode Islanders say doctors should only provide medically accurate information to their patients. They wonder if this is a no-brainer. What are they supposed to be providing medically inaccurate information? And they absolutely want to make sure that women are not required to do anything that's contrary to their doctor's recommendation. And they don't want medical information written by politicians. They want it written by their doctors. And in fact, this is a state, these sentiments are so strong. Nationally, we've been testing some of these messages like, I wouldn't ask my state legislature when to go get a mammogram. I'm not really interested in their opinion on this decision either. This would be the kind of state where that would be off the charts. People are like, what are you doing? Get in your lane and leave me alone in mine. So very, very strong sentiments. The intensity of the previous questions really surprised us, honestly, the level of intensity. I wasn't surprised that people felt that way. I was surprised at the universality and intensity. This is a state, honestly, where if you listen to the politicians talk, you'd think, oh my God, birth control is so controversial. Oh my God, literally and figuratively. And we can't have this argument about employers and providing birth control. Well, actually, Rhode Island voters oppose employers being able to deny coverage for birth control. A solid majority oppose it. And those who are in favor of it are only men, interestingly, Republicans, of whom you have very few, and Catholics. But even men and Catholics still net oppose it. We just don't have a majority opposing it. So only Republicans, of which you don't have a lot, say, I'm divided on this issue. Everybody else says, I think employers should not be denying coverage for birth control. So here's your state. It is a Democratic state. It's also a very independent state. Independents have really been growing. This is the 2014 electorate, which is a more conservative electorate. If we were looking at the 2016 electorate, these numbers would be even stronger, although frankly in some cases, I don't know how they get any stronger. But it's a little more blue collar, and it's definitely an older electorate. 56% of the voters over the age of 50. So that's the sample. Also, when we were first doing this, I was thinking, well, did we get a distorted sample or something? Did we get a bunch of Martians temporarily visiting Rhode Island? But their attitudes were very consistent, and the sample was a very conservative sample. So we asked people, do you think that, what's the direction of Rhode Island on women's issues? Well, a lot of people said, I don't know. And one of the biggest problems we have is a lot of elected officials are doing things not that are popular with the voters. They're not getting away with it because it's popular. They're getting away with it because people don't know they're doing it. People are divided. 41% tend to think things are going in the right direction. 28% say, I tend to think things are going in the wrong direction. The people who are most likely to think that things are going in the right direction are Democrats, unmarried men, strongly pro-choice voters. So one of the things we have going on here is that the strongly pro-choice voters have no idea what's being debated. College graduates and younger men. The people who tend to think it's going in the wrong direction, Republicans, but only 40% of Republicans, Protestants, and those who have only post-high school education. 71, Planned Parenthood's favorability, stronger than most politicians, as strong as the Red Cross. 71% of everyone likes Planned Parenthood. 45% of people strongly like Planned Parenthood. 71% of Americans don't even like their spouses. I mean, this is like the 4th of July, okay? This is, these are amazing numbers. Only 14% have an unfavorable view. Among Democrats, 82% like Planned Parenthood. Democrats are supposed to be so divided on choice in this state. They're supposed to be so divided. Planned Parenthood is too controversial among Democrats. Well, Democrats don't know they're not supposed to like Planned Parenthood. They love Planned Parenthood. 82% of Democrats like Planned Parenthood. Basically, 5% of Democrats say they don't. It's plus or minus 4%. So basically, 1% of Democrats don't like Planned Parenthood. 59% of Democrats strongly like Planned Parenthood. 71% of independents. Even among Republicans, it's net positive, 42% to 38%. Men and women both love Planned Parenthood, which we see all over the country. And there's a real opportunity, honestly, to talk to men about some of the preventive services that Planned Parenthood offers. And boy, are men in this data are really in favor of some of the things like HIV and STD stuff. And it's really stunning how strong the support is. Catholics, okay, everybody knows that Planned Parenthood has to be hush-hush in the Catholic Church, right? Well, no, you can actually yell it from the back pew, because you and Martin Luther, 66% of Catholics in this state like Planned Parenthood, 39% strongly. Only 17% of Catholics are anti-Planned Parenthood. I mean, unfavorable view of Planned Parenthood. It's really amazing. Protestants like Planned Parenthood, and secular voters adore Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood, the people who most love Planned Parenthood, Democratic women, 71% of Democratic women are very favorable to Planned Parenthood. This is a good guide to who we should inform and organize when bad action is being taken. 66% of strong Democrats, 61% of secular voters, 60% of younger women. Now, in Rhode Island, if you're under 60, you're younger. Because this is a really older electorate. Members of the rising American electorate, 58%, strongly like Planned Parenthood, and part-time employees as well. So we move from the general context to the choice. These numbers were just flabbergasting. At first I thought maybe we had the numbers reversed or something. 67%, it looks like 68 here, but with rounding, 67% are pro-choice in the state, only 27% are pro-life in the state. 41% of Rhode Island voters in 2014, a conservative electorate, say, I want abortion generally available without restrictions. 41%. This is higher than the national average, substantially higher than the national average. Only 5% say I want to ban all abortions. And again, remember the error is plus or minus 4%. So basically no one in Rhode Island, except some politicians, want to ban abortions in this state. Other kinds of preventive health care, extremely popular in the state. Other things people want in preventive health care, pregnancy-related services, including prenatal births, visits, and childbirth. For a long time, it's been the strategy of Planned Parenthood and the women's community in Rhode Island, excuse me, to broaden the conversation from abortion to reproductive health services. If there were ever a state that is receptive to that strategy and is already there, you had them at hello, it's Rhode Islanders. 91% say I want the pregnancy-related services in there, absolutely. Testing for HIV and sexually transmitted diseases, 86% want them as preventive health care. Prescription birth control. Rhode Islanders love God, but they love birth control even better. 75% of voters say yes, of course birth control should be in preventive health care. What are we talking about? 61% strongly believe that birth control should be in there. And I think this is one of the reasons why you see the Catholics so strong in this state. A lot of Rhode Island Catholic people have been hearing the sermon and the priest, but have been disagreeing in the pew for a long time. What is your state legislature? A third of the people think their state legislature supports a woman's decision-making on abortion. A third say I think they're opposed, and a third say I don't know. In terms of their own state legislature, excuse me, in terms of their own state legislator, half the people say, I don't know where my own state legislator is. People don't appreciate this is on the agenda at all. They think this is not on the agenda. They don't think it's relevant. They don't think they need to know. And they have no idea. They're not seeking this information out because it's not on their agenda to do anything. They don't think it's on their legislator's agenda either. Roe v. Wade. Are you in favor or opposed to Roe v. Wade? 52% of the voters are in favor of Roe v. Wade, 14% oppose it, 34% say I'm not sure what Roe v. Wade is. Knowledge of Roe v. Wade is a little lower in this state than in a lot of other states that we've polled in. Nationally, 65% of people support Roe v. Wade. And it's not that Rhode Island is more in opposition. It's that we've got more people in undecided. I don't know what you're talking about. And I think because this is a lean-in moment, to use a phrase, I think because people have been intimidated in the state, we haven't talked about this as much as we should. And so our voters don't know as much about what's going on. There's absolutely no reason to be intimidated about this conversation anymore. Would you overturn it? And this is when we describe what the decision is. 53% said no, I would not overturn it. 45% said strongly no, I would not overturn it. Only 28% would overturn it, and only 22% strongly believe they would overturn it. Often we win debates, but we lose the intensity. What's really interesting here is we're winning the intensity by 2-1, and that's true, remember, going back even to those original pro-choice numbers where we were winning the intensity 8-1. The importance of access to all options for women's health, reproductive health care options. These numbers are so strong. This is what we call in our business a valence issue. It's not a debate in the public anymore. It's a core value. That's how strong this is. 93% of the people say, of course it's important. 76% say it is very important. And people say, I'm already decided on this. Nobody's undecided on this. They say, no, I know exactly how I feel about this. It's a core value for me. Even when we specifically add the word abortion, 85% say it's important, 68% say it's very important to me. This chart is a little bit hard to read, but a lot of numbers here, but I'll point it out to you. First of all, notice 90, 90, 90, 90, 90, 90, 90. I mean, just off the charts. And even when you have abortion, still very, very high. A little bit of, actually, a little bit of drop off in terms of Catholics. Catholics and older men are the two groups that drop off the most, but Catholics and older men are still at 78 and 73%. That's huge numbers. And then Democrats and younger women really, really strong on this issue. But across the board, everybody says, of course it's important to have access to this. This is a no-brainer, and yes, including abortion. And there's supposed to be this, dreaded A word that you can't mention in Rhode Island. Well, Rhode Islanders don't know you're not supposed to be able to mention it. They're just fine mentioning it. They're fine including it in their healthcare, and they think this debate is over. We also asked, how supportive are you of protecting the rights of Rhode Islander when it comes to making medical decisions, private medical decisions? And that word private, very strong in the state, by the way. And we said, do you agree or disagree that Rhode Island should pass a law that protects the rights of citizens to make private medical decisions, including the decision about an abortion, so we use the dreaded A word, in the event that federal laws or policies change? Now, in many states, people are nervous about this, like, ooh, what does that mean? And you would expect to get a lot more undecideds. Not true here. People go, sure, let's do it in Rhode Island. And far from Rhode Island wanting to exempt itself and make itself less pro-choice, Rhode Island wants to protect its pro-choice position. 82% agree, 71% strongly. I mean, honestly, it's just astounding, astounding numbers. Lots of other current policies that are very favorable. Confirm that doctors should only provide medically accurate information to their patients. People have been on the phone, we monitor the calls every night. People were like, what's the opposite of that? Medically inaccurate information? Like, why would you go to the doctor for that? When we did sex education work in the state many years ago, we asked people medically accurate sex education. People go, yeah, medically inaccurate sex education is what you can get in the schoolyard all the time for the last 100 years. Ensure that women are not required to get medical services that conflict with their doctor's recommendation for care. 71% say, I would pass a law that does this. Now, some of these things may seem like best practices, but Rhode Island's ready to pass laws that maintain this. Establish that doctors are not required to provide information to their patients that's written by politicians. 61% favor that. People are wondering, why are politicians writing this stuff anyway? Add additional restrictions to abortion to cut back on abortionist birth control. Now, this is nationally the most controversial way you can word this. This is the most damaging way that you can word the language. And Rhode Islanders really, really, they're supposed to be so sensitive on this topic. No, they're very reasonable. And so 49% said, I would be for that, but 42% said, I'm not sure that sounds so good. And remember, we had 41% of the people who said, I'm for abortion, I don't want any additional restrictions, and they mean it. They don't want any additional restrictions. Then this one shocked me. Allow employers to deny insurance coverage to their employees for birth control and abortion if it goes against the employer's religious beliefs. Now, this is really their side's best wording, because religious beliefs, people think separation of church and state, separation of church and state. People go, you can't require the Catholic Church to pay for your abortion. If you're working for the Catholic Church, you should know they're not going to. And yet, even with birth control and abortion, 58% of people said, no, I'm against that. They didn't say I'm undecided about it, which they, you might have thought, this is confusing, I don't know where to come. No, 58% said I'm opposed to it. Only 34% of people said I'm in favor of this kind of law. And notice again the intensity. The intensity is supposed to be on the other side, right? The whole reason we engaged in a national compromise on this was because people were so intense on this issue. Not in Rhode Island. In Rhode Island, the intensity is on stay out of it. No, you're the employer. You're not making personal decisions for me. Notice that all of these core policies, now this is strongly favored. This is not total favor. This is intensity. Notice the intensity across the board on the medically accurate information, that you shouldn't get information that's written by politicians, and you shouldn't get information that conflicts with your doctor's recommendations. People just think, boy, is this stuff legal now? This should be illegal. And it's interesting that they don't want to just have it again as best practices. They want laws on this. They're fine with laws on this. Yeah, let's just end this so you don't have to worry about it. The denying birth control, even if it goes against your employer's religious beliefs. This is the strongly favor and the strongly opposed. Notice, even among the Catholics, more people strongly oppose than strongly favor, and a majority of Catholics in this state oppose allowing the employer to deny coverage for birth control and abortion if it goes against their religious beliefs, the employer's religious beliefs. Really, really stunning data. Really remarkably robust. Very, very different than what we thought. So the nice thing about it is, conventional wisdom is totally turned on its head. Not only are the views, the conventional wisdom is 100% wrong, but the intensity and the level of support is downright shocking. We were shocked by these numbers. And the support reaches deeply into some very conservative voters. This is a 2014 electorate, it's an older electorate, it's a Catholic electorate, and voters are wildly in favor of our side. So this is the liberation of our side. So go forth and know you're right, and know everything you're saying is more popular than the politician you're saying it to. So I'll turn it back to you and open it up for questions.
We know that there hadn't been a poll conducted in Rhode Island on these issues, I don't think ever. We know that in 1986 there was a constitutional convention question teed up to the voters, and we know that 2-to-1 the voters of Rhode Island said no, they did not want to change existing law on abortion. But since then, I mean, that's almost 30 years ago, we really hadn't had any data. So we're super excited that we could partner with Women's Fund on this and get this really important information, because we do feel as though we all labor, I think all of us and OW in the room labor every year under the prevailing notion that Rhode Island is an exception, is out of sync with New England, and in fact is more conservative. So all of this really debunks that myth. And we, if anyone has questions for Selinda, please
Or comments.
go ahead.
Do we have this in a summary or in this PowerPoint presentation that we can send to the legislators so they can personally see it themselves?
Well, we have a press summary that in fact is in the, there may be press kits that you can grab one, and we can work over time to sort of maybe put this in a more visual format for folks. We're not actually giving the PowerPoint out right today to press, but we, in the fullness of time, we hope to use this in lots of different ways. So let us know if you need it. Carolyn.
How do you reconcile the percentage of Rhode Islanders that do not want to see Roe v. Wade overturned versus percentage that support abortion rights? Because the margin is not as great on that. And I'm wondering, is that because we're very independent and from a rights perspective? I think at the federal level we shouldn't be. But
No, I
at the
think
state level,
honestly,
not.
it's that the abortion dialogue has been so intimidated in this state. I think it was really interesting because you have an older electorate. And it wasn't that people were opposed to Roe v. Wade, it was people just did not know what we were talking about. And I think what's happened is because we have been intimidated out of this dialogue for so long, and I don't mean necessarily the groups in this room, because obviously you are engaged in it on a day-by-day basis, but people just in Rhode Island just not familiar with what we're talking about. That's the real reason. And then also I think it sounded a little dated to people. Well, you know, okay, old decisions, but how about the current laws? So those were the two factors, but mainly it's just people didn't know what we were talking about. And nationally, people are more familiar with Roe v. Wade.
Because I think that's really important for us to kind of learn how to articulate, because if you look at 53%, that looks like a slight majority, when there's a deeper message there about what people know, don't know, and all
Well,
that.
and remember
That's a number that I think in some ways mirrors some of the national statistics around Roe v. Wade, perhaps where there's less of an undecided population.
Yeah, Roe v. Wade is 65% nationally in the latest data that we've done.
Right, so I worry a little bit about that 53% without the context of the undecided.
Well, and of course, we present it with the context of the undecided, but,
Right.
so here's your data. It's 52 to 14. That's a huge margin. That's a better margin than the national. It's just
Okay.
your overall level of support
I see.
is lower than the national, because you've got a huge block of people sitting over here.
So people are just confused because they're getting so many mixed messages perhaps about what it really is.
And I think they just don't know. I'm not even sure they're confused. I think they plain haven't heard it. I mean, what's Roe v. Wade? Where, you know, I mean, in other states where this debate is more engaged, and frankly, in states that end up not being as good as Rhode Island, you know, it's very common for a politician to say, I support Roe v. Wade. The Supreme Court settled this, I support the Supreme, and that's just in the dialogue. Planned Parenthood will say, I support Roe v. Wade. You know, the newspapers will write, we support Roe v. Wade, it was decided 30 years ago. Here, you don't hear that as much. I don't think politicians run around talking about that as much. And so I think that people just plain don't know. And we didn't explain it. We said, do you favor or oppose Roe versus Wade decision, or are you not sure? And people go, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what decision you mean. Because people just haven't engaged and leaned in. Now, I do think what's interesting, though, is certainly you can spend time educating people, but frankly, your state is so aggressive about some of these other laws that you may just want to move into these other proposals and put together the Rhode Island modern agenda, which includes, forget what goes on nationally, we're going to protect it here. We're not going to back off here, which is wildly supported. So you could educate people about Roe v. Wade, but frankly, people are ahead of Roe v. Wade
Right.
in this state. And the irony is that people don't know about Roe v. Wade because the politicians assume that the voters are more divided on Roe v. Wade, and it's not true at all.
What I like about the way you did the questions, Selinda, is that you put abortion in the context of reproductive health care. And most of the
Yeah.
questions, it was, do you support full reproductive health care? Do you support full reproductive health care, including abortion? So that it was, for the responder, the subject on the phone, it felt like abortion as part of a bigger picture, rather than, you know, when we talk about Roe v. Wade, we kind of are honing in
Yeah,
on it in a
that's
different
right.
way with kind of a political aura about it. So anyway, I kind of think you're right, that there's maybe work we could do legislatively that sort of skirts around Roe v. Wade and moves right to, you know, guaranteeing access to reproductive health care,
Well,
including abortion.
Right. I mean, you know, nationwide, for example, you've got 45% of the voters who are pro-choice. You've got 67% who are pro-choice here. So support for Roe v. Wade is 65% nationally. So you're using Roe v. Wade because you're picking up people who aren't pro-choice but think, oh, I can't overrule the Supreme Court. Okay, I don't love it, but I don't love a lot of things they say, like free speech. Here you're in the reverse position. You got more people pro-choice than supporting Roe v. Wade, only because they don't know what it is. So you don't have to do this bank shot. And in fact, you have the ability, and voters are already with you, you have succeeded in and have the ability to define a modern agenda that you are very aggressive about. It's like, let's go.
I'm curious on how you got your random sample.
Oh, voter file. We bought available a list from, that has a voter file of likely 2014 voters. And includes cell phones. Then we called people 3 different times on 2 different days to try to make sure that we got them. And we re-screened them for whether they're likely 2014 voters.
Can you talk a little bit about the younger demographic? Because that was really interesting to me, because when you look at kind of the activist community here, they definitely trend younger.
Yeah.
And yet the data seems to indicate that it's older women that are more strongly in support than younger women. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, so you have a lot of support in both cases. The other thing that's really interesting is you have quite a bit of support among younger men, too. So don't forget the younger men, which is really interesting. A lot of states do not have that. But what we know nationwide is the baby boomer women are the most pro-choice women out there. Because for them, they remember when abortions weren't legal. For the millennials and the Gen Xers, and the Gen Xers are like 35 to 45, the millennials are under 30. The millennials are pretty pro-choice, but it's just not their burning issue in the sense that they know about medical abortions. And they know also about home remedy medical abortions, just up your birth control, et cetera, et cetera. So, and they don't think that abortions were ever illegal. Millennials are tougher. They're less pro-choice, and they are the AIDS generation. And they've always been very judgmental about it. Because from their perspective, if you were stupid enough to go without protection, you didn't just risk, in their youth, you didn't just risk an unintended pregnancy, you risked dying because of AIDS. So how stupid could you be? And so they've always been less pro-choice because they didn't know when it was ever illegal, and more judgmental because of this AIDS prism that they brought to the issue. The millennials are not as judgmental because they don't have that AIDS prism, but they're still like, well, it's always been legal, and just soup up your birth control or go buy EC or whatever. One of the things that's very interesting is that baby boomer women, who are the most pro-choice, do have, however, a very antiquated view of abortion. They talk about it in terms of intrusive surgery, bleeding to death, vacuuming. They don't know about modern abortion in 2014. They don't know about medical abortions. And they're going back to their own youth. Their daughters know about medical abortions, but they don't tend to know about how abortion is done today, particularly in the early stages of a pregnancy.
Other questions, comments? Thank you for
Thank
being
you for
here.
coming.
We're just really so excited, and I give Paula a lot of credit for being the person who really
Absolutely.
felt like this kind of information would be a game changer for us, and we hope that it will be going forward. So some of us who work in coalition together in the room can cogitate further at Reproductive Justice Coalition meetings about what this means for our legislative plans, and hopefully not this session, but the session to come. And if anyone does want further info, we certainly, I'm sure there are press packets here. If anyone came who isn't press would like one, you're certainly welcome to have one, and otherwise be in touch if you need more from us. And thank you very much. Thank you, Selinda, for hustling up here from
Thank you for both you all and the Women's Fund for having us do this great work.
Right, so onward to the Women's Fund and a full day of Selinda Lake.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.